why don't you get your pen and paper ready, and we start out with the ingredient list, okay? Boom, here we are. We snap into action. Well, what we're going to start out with, of course, is 1.5 quarts of chicken stock, 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 onion, preferably white, finely chopped, 3 garlic cloves, chopped, 1/4 cup of fresh frozen porcini mushroom, thinly sliced, or else you can use dried porcini, and I'll tell you about that later. 1/2 cup of fresh cremini or portobello, thinly sliced, of course. 1/2 cup of fresh shiitake. Take the stem off though, and then slice the caps of the mushroom. Then 3 tablespoons of chopped fresh parsley. 1.5 cup of white wine. 3 cups of arborio rice. 3/4 teaspoon of salt. 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. 1/2 cup of heavy cream. Of course, it's optional. I'll talk to you about that later. 3 tablespoons of butter, also optional. I'll talk to you about that later. And 5 tablespoons of grated Parmigiano Reggiano. Here we are. Why don't we start out, first of all, with sauteing the onions. That's very important. What I like to do in this particular case is always a nice mix of olive oil and butter. Why olive oil and butter? Tell you the truth, I don't know. That's the way Mom used to make it. No, I know the reason why. Because the olive oil by itself could be too heavy, and the butter brings out the nice round finish to the dish. And I think that's the reason why. And then, you know, you do something for so long, you get used to it. You don't think of a reason, an explanation, a scientific reason. Even though if we go deep down, you start thinking there is an explanation for everything. At this point, we add the onions. As you see, they're very finely chopped. Into the pan they go. And we let them cook, first on high heat for a couple of minutes. Then, as soon as they pick up the butter, the flavor of the butter, we add the garlic. And together, we let it simmer. It's not like you let them simmer, but what you do, you reduce the heat. And this process is very important. And let me talk to you about why. Because we want to make sure that the onions and the garlic cook together. They don't burn, and they bring out the sweetness that's natural to the onion and the fragrance that's natural to the garlic. This will make the flavor base for the mushrooms that we will add later. So, at this point, we'll let this rest for a little while, and we cook it on low heat for about 4 minutes. Remember, every time I tell you something, don't be stuck on the times that I give you, but try to experiment with your own. What you really want to achieve at this particular point is to soften up the onions and to get the fragrance of the garlic. If you look into the pan, if you see that the garlic is starting to burn, turning brown, well, you have an indication that maybe it's about time to move on to the rest of the recipe. So improvise. I mean, listen to me. It's not that I'm an expert, but I love what I do. But what I do a lot of times is don't cook by time, it's cook by sense, cook by feel. And after a while, your body, your eyes, your vision, the taste, the smell of what you're making will guide you into what's right and what's wrong. So use my information as an indication, but not as a rule not to be broken. Rules are made to be broken. Then we put the rest of the ingredients. The selection of mushrooms, the porcini. I always talk to you about fresh porcini. I told you many times, fresh porcini, they're difficult to find. I know, and I hope I don't discourage you from making this dish. You can always find dry porcini. Sometimes dry porcini, let me bring out the heat here a little bit higher. I like to put this on a high heat when we do it. Sometimes dry porcini also have a much more intense flavor of fresh porcini. Some of the fresh porcini, especially the one coming from the Pacific Northwest, when picked up at the wrong time of the year, oh, it's not the wrong time, there is not the right and the wrong time, but into the later end of the season, they don't have the strong, mushroom, powerful quality that porcini do have. The dry porcini, for the very reason that they are dry, they have an incredible concentration of flavor, and sometimes I like to add it. One technique that you can do, you can go and double up, let's say, on the white button mushrooms or the cremini mushrooms that you pretty much have available everywhere, and then add up the dry porcini without even softening them up. You break them up in small bits and you saute them together. Then when you add the stock and you cook the rice and the stock all together, you will notice that the dry porcini will also soften up automatically, and then will spike up the flavoring of the rice. It's an alternative. You don't have to do it, but if you find yourself without any special mushrooms, that's an alternative to use. Hey, I'm getting confused. I'm talking. I don't want to lose what to do. We want to brown the mushrooms for a little while. At this point, what I like to do is add some of the salt and some of the pepper in a mix that I've shown you, and then deglaze it with the wine. On high heat, we want to deglaze the wine. The wine is very important. It's going to make the base for the sauce, and at the same time, it will allow us to deglaze the pan. by dislodging the brown bits that might have accumulated at the bottom. Those brown bits are gold for a recipe. Gold, I tell you. They're the soul of the recipe. So very careful. You want to go around the bottom of the pan and picking them up. You can feel it right at the end of your spoon if they're there. You want to dislodge them and continue to cook. Also, I have a non-stick pan which makes my job enormously much easier to deal with. If you don't, what you want to make sure is whatever pan you do have, that when you work with it, you go look for these beautiful brown spots and you dislodge them properly as they should be. Ah, guarda qua. How long should you cook this for? Let's not go into time. Let's go once again for this that we want to look for. We want to look for the wine to reduce by almost half. As the wine is reduced by almost half, then we add the rest of the ingredient, which is the arborio rice in this particular case. Many of you have written me very discouraged about not being able to find arborio rice. Say, hey, Nick, I love your dishes. It looks fantastic. It looks beautiful, but I cannot find arborio rice. Well, there is different kind of super fino rice that you can find. Vialona and Carnaroli. But if you want to stick with American rice, choose any kind of rice you want. Whole rice, short grain rice. However, I must tell you something. If you do go with the American short grain rice or any other kind of rice imported that's short grain, you know, thick and looks like the arborio, you have to change the cooking time. And in my experience, it's almost changing it by half. That's a reality. At this point, we want to add the stock. About half of the stock. Now, before I go on, this is a shortcut that I'm taking just to show you the complete procedure. What we have on this side right here is the stock, the whole 1.5 quart of stock that I brought to boil. To be completely exact with this recipe, what we want to do is to actually add 3 cups of this stock to the rice and cover basically the rice with stock. Then we bring the rice to a boil, the stock and the rice mixture to a boil once again. Once it reaches a boil, we cover it. And we simmer it for 15 minutes. I told you before, and I'm telling you again, this is a shortcut. And I want to show you what I mean by shortcut. There's 2 pots here that I prepared. And I want to show you what the rice looks like. Come here. This is important. After 15 minutes that you have cooked the rice, and let's go back and be very specific. What we do, we bring the rice to a boil together with the stock. Once it reaches a boil, we reduce it to a simmer without stirring or anything. We put a cover on it and we'll let it cook for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, most of the stock will have been absorbed by the rice. And this is what it looks like. And you will go, oh my God, I made cement! Relax, because the solution is coming up. Here what we have with us is hot stock. With the hot stock, we're going to add it to the rice that we have right here. And we're going to do for about 7 to 8 minutes the traditional way of cooking risotto, which basically is stirring the rice around. At first it will be hard, but as you dislodge the rice, you'll see that the rice starts to get the gloss that you want. And I'll hold this over here, otherwise it'll pop off. You see what I mean? You want to do this for 7 to 8 minutes and basically add all the rest of the stock that you have. The rule is you don't have to add all of the stock, but pretty close to it, it does help. Let me show you what the rice looks afterwards, after 7 or 8 minutes of continuous mixing. Let me bring this back up close because I want you to be able to see the difference. You see how much creamier this rice is than this rice? They are the same exact rice that we cooked. This is 15 minutes. This is 15 minutes plus 7 to 8 minutes of continuous addition of stock and stirring. This rice is almost ready to be served. So let me add some more stock. Let's absorb it. Now, this is the style of the rice that you want. How do you like it? You like it alonda, you like it dry. Alonda is when there is a lot of liquid. Dry is when the rice is basically almost like a New Zealand friend of mine says, porridge-like consistency. Hey, that could be it. Now we're going to do la mantecatura. You could just add the cheese, and that's it. Together, of course, with the parsley, and that's it. If you want, you can also add the butter and the cream, or the butter or the cream. And this particular rice that we made today, it's quite rich enough. So we're going to be good boys. We're going to hold back. Let me take this away. I'll put it over here. And now I'm going to show you how to serve it. You let this rest for about 3 minutes. During the 3 minutes that this does rest, it will absorb all the stock that we added. As it absorbs the stock, we are now ready to make the last final mix. The parsley will give it the color, and the cheese will give it the extra flavor. Let's give it a little bit more stock. And here we are, ready to serve it. Let's get a nice dish. Remember, when you serve this to your friends, you always want to hold back a little bit, because if you're anything like me, you want to wait and make sure that you get the biggest taste. Now, I'm a crazy man about pepper, so what I like to do at the end is always to sprinkle some pepper around. And believe it or not, my friends, we just finished a fantastic recipe together. Risotto with wild mushroom. And I just showed you the shortcut on how to make risotto. Please enjoy this risotto, share it with your friends. And